Great. Well, thank you very much for Ron to inviting me to come all the way here from London to this event. You're going to see two great other reports today, other research, which have a common link, and there are two common links. One is both of the originators have the word doctor in front of their name, so suddenly I feel deeply inferior, and my master suddenly feels really quite second rate. The second is that both of the other studies are about the leadership of the PR function, whereas what I'm about to cover, the research that we've done at Ketchum, is about the relationship of the function to leadership. So it's almost a sort of photographic negative of what you're going to see from the other studies. Our study is a piece of research we've done for the last 2 years, looking at the views of 6,000 people in 12 countries on 5 continents around the world on the notion of effective leadership, effective communication, and how the two relate to each other. And I would just stress at the outset that the word leadership for us in this context is not about the leader, the CEO, leadership in the sense that anyone, anywhere, at any level can and should be delivering leadership. And secondly, that leadership is not only by individuals, it's about leadership by brands, by corporations, and by individuals. So just to sort of define our terms, that leadership is a broad thing here, as opposed to being specifically about the leader or the CEO. So 15 minutes, 3 things. One is the extent of the crisis of leadership that we're seeing. Secondly, the role of communication in finding solutions to that. And thirdly, a point of view and approach we've been taking at Ketchum that you may just find provocative, interesting, useful, terrible. You will be the judge of all of those things. So first of all, why did we do the study? Well, when I took this job as director of our global corporate and public affairs practice 2 years ago, I was consulting with clients and colleagues, what do you want? And they said, thought leadership. So I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning worrying about thought leadership. And then I immediately thought, how many leaders wake up worrying about thought leadership? And the answer is that many. But this was 2011. This was the Arab Spring. This was the Occupy movement. This was the Indignados on the streets of Spain. And for me, the thing that crystallized the crisis of leadership was Time magazine, for only the second time in their history, making a category of person rather than an individual their person of the year, and that category was the protester, and that for me, as I say, really crystallized the extent of that crisis. And I forgot to say, by the way, you'll see sadly no bar charts, no statistics, no bullet points, so it's all very left brain. For the right brain we have a little infographic. We cater to all cortexes is our strapline. It's not really, but you take my point. So yes, so there was this crisis of leadership that felt really rich, so we thought that's interesting. But there are also 70,000 books on Amazon on leadership. There's an entire industry, most of them on Twitter, these gurus in leadership. There's an entire industry on communication, which is ours. And so we thought, oh, well, there must be, as night follows day, huge amounts of work going on at the middle of that Venn diagram. And bizarrely, virtually nothing. So we thought, fantastic, we'll give that a go. So that's where the study was born from. Basically looking at 3 things. One is assessing how leaders and their communication are judged. Looking at some of the most important attributes and communication behaviours of effective leaders. Crucially for us as an agency, to provide counsel on what we call a path to more effective leadership and effective leadership communication. And of course, by doing it year on year as we intend to, we of course get longitudinal data that hopefully over the years provides some interesting comparative insights. So what did we find? Well, first of all, we found a crisis of leadership. In both years, less than 1 in 4 respondents from around the world felt that leaders were leading effectively. Also, a sizable gap between expectation and delivery. Last year, there was a 28-point gap between what was expected of leaders and how they were performing against those expectations. I'm not a statistician, 28 points is statistically relevant, I believe. 21 points this year, still significant, slightly down, but nonetheless something to be worried about. Also, rather like the British weather, we assume that it's going to get worse no matter what we're told. And we found that in both years, the numbers who felt that things were going to get better over the coming year were massively outweighed by those who either thought it would stay the same or believed that it was going to get worse. So actually 27% this year thought that leadership in 2013 would actually deteriorate. Only 15% thought it would get better. So, a crisis of leadership, a gap between expectation and delivery. Why? What are the reasons? So one of the reasons we wanted to look into was this notion of accountability. And what we found, that almost identical to the scores on leadership, less than 1 in 4 felt that leaders were taking proper accountability when they or their organisation fell short. So we have a responsibility problem. We also wanted to look into the notion of short versus long-term thinking. And again, what we found is that with the exception of 2 categories of leaders from the 5 that we looked at, leaders were generally seen as putting the short term ahead of the long term. Interestingly, the lead category who was seen as more long-termist were business leaders, which that was counterintuitive for us. We have the stereotype that the CEO and the board are obsessed with the next quarter's results and the analyst report. The public believes, actually, the business leaders are more long-termist than any other category of leader, which surprised us, to be honest. So, moving on to what we all do, which is communication. How important is this? Well, delighted to say that above any of the other attributes of an effective leader, open, transparent communication in both years was viewed by 6,000 people as the number 1 attribute of an effective leader, which is why it's so worrying that year on year we saw a 24-point drop in people's views of leaders' communications effectiveness 2013 versus 2012, and a massive 29-point gap between expectation and delivery on communication. So if we have a crisis in leadership, we also have a crisis in communication. So, does it matter, or is this just some PR firm saying, yeah, communications is really important? You would say that. Well, it's not us saying it, it's the data. However, we wanted to see, could we find a causal link between views of leaders and actual behaviour, particularly purchasing behaviour? So what we did this year was to look at whether in the last 12 months, respondents had either stopped buying or bought less from a company as a result of poor leadership perceptions, or conversely, started buying or bought more. And really striking was the stat that 60% of respondents had either boycotted a firm or bought less in the last 12 months because of poor perceptions of leadership. And what's as interesting, if not more so, is that the negative impact of poor leadership perceptions is greater than the positive impact of positive leadership perceptions. In other words, 51% bought less as a result of poor leadership, only 36% bought more. So it kind of suggests that good leadership is a table stake relative to how you operate in a crisis. So for all of those you involved in crisis, you're doing good, important work. So, moving on, who came out on top? Well, business, but very, very relatively. For example, only 34% felt that business leaders were leading well, and only 26% felt they were communicating well, which was half the number from the previous year. So, not even the business community, the winner in these terms, has much to crow about. We did a lot on vertical sectors, so we looked at 19 vertical industries through the prism of communication, leadership and responsibility. Who came out on top? Well, last year it was what we called knowledge-intensive industries, tech, telecoms, energy and so on. This year, technology was the clear winner on every metric. And I haven't got time, but we've also got data where we can drive down and work out what the specific drivers are of positive perceptions for each specific vertical. So there's quite a lot of rich data there. And then geographically, last year, Western Europe and the US were particularly unhappy compared with the other markets. This year, the US has cheered up moderately. Europe deeply unhappy. Is that surprising? Not at all, given the nature of the political and economic crisis going on at the moment. But the stats were really striking. Only 16% feeling that European leaders are communicating effectively, 15% seeing them as leading well, and 8% think that things will get better. So that was the diagnosis, and as you'll see with the 2-part nature of the study, we were determined that this wouldn't be just another study that diagnoses a problem. We were determined to be, to quote Coldplay, part of the cure. Sorry for that. So a few more practical lessons that the data told us about what is the role of communications in helping to solve this crisis. Well, at Ketchum we talk an awful lot about the say-do gap. and the pernicious influence that that can have on brands and reputations. And interestingly, while communication was the number one attribute of an effective leader, immediately behind that were 4 attributes that were almost entirely to do with action. Taking tough decisions, admitting mistakes, leading by example, and handling crises calmly. So although communication is an absolute imperative, substantive action really matters, and I'll come back to that as one of our core themes. We wanted to look at communication channels, which channels are particularly effective as sources of leadership credibility, and this was fascinating. That essentially any channel that involved in some shape or form the personal presence and involvement of the leader, by which I mean in-person appearances, televised speeches, broadcast, print, where obviously a leader is being interviewed, were way up there. Top was in person at 43. By comparison, social, which we spend our lives obsessing with and telling our clients is absolutely the order of the day, Facebook 17%. Advertising, hooray, 14%. Twitter, just 9%. So we had a bit of a panic last year. We thought, oh, is our advice all completely misguided? And then we realized that actually the answer is no. The answer is that irrespective of the channel, the imperative is to get the presence of the leader coming through. And we could have a whole debate about why CEO blogs do or don't work in light of those data. What does the world want leaders to do to get us out of trouble and help restore confidence? Well, first and foremost, they want honesty. 60% said they wanted leaders to be open and honest about the nature of the challenge ahead. Only 22% felt that the leaders should hold back for fear of damaging already fragile confidence. But equally, they want a clear vision for what leaders are going to do about it. But also, next in line, collaborative and consultative in the way that they arrive at solutions. And that's another strong theme that we talk about, is the potential death of the muscular hero leader. Moving from leaders to corporations, what makes a corporation be seen as a leader? Well, analysts will tell you it's quality of management, it's financial strength, it's innovation. All of those things are there mid-table. But actually, in both years, by a fair margin, trustworthiness was the number one attribute of a corporation that people felt allowed it to be seen as a leader. Never have a PowerPoint slide without Bart Simpson in. That's another strapline of Ketchum. Why have I got Bart Simpson there? Because we wanted to look at sources of information on a company. Who do you view as particularly credible in forming a view of whether a company is a leader? And the answer is it's Homer, not Mr. Burns. The number one most trusted source of information is an employee of an organization who you know, followed by industry analysts and staff involved in sales, followed by financial analysts and staff involved in customer care. So there's an obvious missing piece, which is the C-suite. Where is the C-suite in all of this? The CEO, number 6, other senior management, number 7, equal with the media. So you kind of think, if your senior management are no more trusted than the media who report on you, you have an executive visibility problem. Equally, it tells us that third-party and stakeholder engagement is actually enormously business relevant. And crucially, it underlines what we know already, is that the single most powerful advocate of a company is its own employees. Hence the service value chain, hence the existence of the entire employee engagement discipline. Moving forward, we wanted to look not only this year at the static snapshot, but what's coming down the pipe. So we looked at 10 emerging leadership attributes. And again, what was fascinating is the number one attribute seen by respondents as being likely to rise up the agenda in the next decade was leaders who can build and inspire teams who together can create the future. So again, that theme of collective, collaborative leadership as opposed to muscular, heroic leadership. So we had to try and sum it up. How do we pull all this data together? And we felt that basically it's a formula, it's like a mathematical equation in that if any part of the equation is removed, the equation ceases to operate. And it's in 3 parts. One is open communication, the second is decisive action, and the third is the personal presence and engagement of the leader. So, very quickly, what does all this mean? The data is fascinating. There's some interesting pointers as to the role of communication and specific ways in which you can help restore confidence. Is this a risk? Is this an opportunity? Well, you probably know that the Chinese symbol for crisis consists of those for opportunity and risk. And our view is that this is an enormous opportunity for the comms function if we're prepared to actually listen to what the data tells us and act on it. And in doing so, we've been looking briefly with clients at what we call the 4 faces of leadership. So if you'll indulge me for a couple of minutes. Since man first skinned a mammoth, leadership has been a core organising principle of society. Leadership has always been collective. Equally, lots of academics, you'll know that's Nietzsche. Normally I do a quiz and give out prizes, but there's no time for that. The will to power. Leadership is also highly individual. People are motivated by the desire to be rich or famous or to change the world. So there's collective, there's individual. That's okay. Over the last 150 years, we went from mercantile families to brands and corporations. And leadership is now an absolute brand and corporate imperative. And of course, finally, Joseph Rowntree, from the late 19th century onwards, the realization that the reason employee engagement matters is you can't actually make decent chocolate if your employees aren't fed and housed and educated and motivated. So the idea of leadership being either about the individual leader or just about one of these 4 is flawed. And we're finding it useful to think about leadership in a number of different ways. We've also been thinking a lot and talking to our clients a lot about the other age-old part of a leader's life. What do leaders exist to do, the more senior you get? To make endless decisions, choices, trade-offs. And that's fundamental to what we believe the role of communications becomes. I don't know if people know the work of I've just blanked the guy in London whose research on this is vital. I'll come back to it. There's some research that basically says the thing that the C-suite wants above all else is intelligence and data that helps them make decisions, that helps inform actual strategy. And of course, leaders now have to make decisions in a highly complex environment, an environment where they sit at the intersection of a range of really tough dynamics, corporate and brand reputation, the move from monologue to dialogue, leadership and communication. Consumers meeting policy, meeting business, Wall Street, K Street, and Main Street in US terms. Where culture and popular culture start to create issues that start to inform policy making, internal and external. The list goes on. You get the idea that essentially as leaders try and make choices, they find themselves at the middle of this dizzying web of complexity. And I love the thing that Bruce is going to talk about later of comms as sense making. And so for us, where we've ended up with this is that the role of comms, which has always been about communication and engagement, which is fine and it always will be, has morphed. Is that if it's about open communication, decisive action, and personal presence, then the role of the comms function starts to be about helping leaders to decide, to act, and to engage as they go through that cycle of making business decisions, acting on them, and communicating. And therefore, for us is about helping clients achieve leadership advantage. We've ripped off Porter from the 60s, but if competitive advantage is dead, there's some of the debate around that, then there could be an interesting debate to be had about the role of comms helping leaders and corporations achieve leadership advantage. So, just to conclude, if I'm allowed to play a little video, have I got time, Bruce? You're going to be nice to me, aren't you?
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, The first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut, and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers, because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is over-glorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
So I presented that last month, and someone actually asked me to take my shirt off, which I didn't do then, nor am I going to. The point being, we have a crisis of leadership. Comms is fundamental to solving it, and leadership ultimately is not about the leadership, it's about the movement and followers that you create. So probably more than 15 minutes. I apologise, Bruce. Over to you.